Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very excited to bring you a look at the new Transformers Studio Series number 80, Brawn from Transformers Bumblebee. Now, Brawn is a character I think has got a lot of people excited because the poor guy doesn't get a whole lot of toys compared to, some of the others like, Ratchet, Wheeljack. And even though this is technically a very different Brawn than the Generation 1 character, he follows a lot of the same aesthetic and seemingly personality traits as the 1980s original. So, if you've seen my reviews before, you know this goes. We're going to take a look at Brawn's packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll see his instructions. At some point during the video, we'll take a look at his backdrop, and of course we'll see Brawn himself in both vehicle and robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Brawn comes in your standard Deluxe class packaging for Studio Series. Get his name, number, logos, callouts, all that. And then a really big CGI render of Brawn right here on the front. Those beady little eyes. And of course, we have our half window where you can see about the top half or so of the figure. Squat little guy that he is. Turn to the side, you get a real close-up face shot of Brawn's render. On the side, you get more of a zoomed-out one where you see more of his legs. And then on the back, we get renders of Brawn in both vehicle and robot modes. He only takes 18 steps to transform, so he's not a very complex Deluxe class toy, but that doesn't necessarily make him a bad one. His backdrop is the Seibertron Falls backdrop that, like all of the Studio Series figures that come from the intro scene from that Bumblebee movie, seem to share. Then over here on the left, you get flavor text that says, Brawn helps his Autobot allies hold the line against Decepticons before being knocked by an enemy blast. I like that. So it is a reference to the fact that during the firefight with the Decepticons, Brawn ends up taking a hit in the shoulder, which itself is a reference to the 1986 animated movie, where Brawn seemingly dies by taking a hit to the shoulder. And it's kind of become, a running joke with the character that, he's supposed to be all tough and durable, but apparently you shoot him in the shoulder and he's done for. So I thought that was a really funny nod. I mean, it's kind of a blink and you miss it thing too, but it does show that somebody was really paying attention there. Now, hopefully that doesn't mean that this version of Brawn actually died from getting hit in the arm. I don't think he did. It sure would be a shame to have him just written off as like a punchline. But whether he survived or didn't, his appearance in that intro has now spawned this really cool looking toy. So I can't complain too much. Alright, so that is the packaging. About what you'd expect for a standard Deluxe class here. So now, let's go ahead and open it up. Alright, here we have Brawn's instructions. So you get the nice render of him on the front, holding both his rifle and his little drill as like a melee weapon here, which is interesting. Got the name, number, all that good stuff. On the front, this shows you how to store his weapon on his back, and also how to combine the two weapons together, which is something that they don't show on the packaging, so that's pretty cool. And then we do the transformation from robot to very alien-looking vehicle mode. Like the whole domed cockpit thing going on. And then you actually can flip his grill up to reveal this 5mm port to plug the drill into, to make him an actual like mold machine, and then put the long rifle on top like a cannon. So overall, very cool so far. And now here's the vehicle mode. You can see we have the drill attached to the front, cannon on top, and I mean, it's strange looking. It's definitely not your typical vehicle mode. Very, very different. I don't know, it reminds me of something from like Captain Nemo's Voyages or something, just, something cool and quirky. Sadly, the drill doesn't spin at all. That would have been cool if there was like a little motorized gimmick, but he does roll exceptionally well. Look how smooth that is. Which is funny because he's just such an odd little, vehicle here, but he rolls better than most of like the cars that these things turn into. So I love how well the rolling works. He does have the pegs through the wheels, which, I mean, guess we just got to get used to it. You don't have to like it, but get used to it. But the wheels themselves are cool. Very different kind of patterning on the like tire part, if you can call those tires. And then the rim area is like multi-layered. It's this nice metallic green color. Very nice. Lots of kind of exposed parts and circuitry around here, owing to the fact that this is still a live-action movie toy. You get the Autobot symbol on back. And, I mean, it's pretty solid overall. It's a little gappy, especially right here. If you hold it at the right angle, you can see right through it. And he does have some pretty bad visible head syndrome, but at least his head is just kind of shaped like a generic dome. Not super noticeable. Looks like it might be an engine or something. It keeps falling off. Well, since it is falling off, go ahead and see what it looks like without the weapons. So first of all, that visible head syndrome gets worse because there's nothing hiding that away. Check out that cockpit right there. That's cool, huh? It's like a smoky windshield. So, take the drill off, set all that aside, and then you actually flip the little grill section back down to give yourself more of a standard, like, car grill or vent. And then it just becomes more of like a little, almost submersible looking vehicle. And it's kind of quirky, but Brawn has never been a very big character, so I think it works. You know, it's small but solid looking, which really just evokes Brawn's classic look. Okay, this review is going to be a little bit light on group shots, just because I don't really have many iterations of Brawn at all. So this is the most recent outing, which was the Titans Return Generation 1 Brawn. Just so you can see how very different his Seibertronian and Earth-based vehicle modes are. This one's also quite a bit smaller because he is a Legend scale, or, you know, in modern terms, I guess, core class toy. So, you know, these two don't scale together well at all. Up until the War for Seibertron trilogy, the MO with the Minibot characters was to make them Legend scale. But since a couple years ago, they've switched it up, and now they're just making them small deluxes with lots of accessories. So, I'd imagine it's not too far-fetched to think that we might get a Deluxe class G1 Brawn, you know, sometime in Legacy or in the near future. In a way that makes me kind of sad, because there were some really solid additions to that Minibot lineup. When you look at toys like Brawn and Sea Spray, I mean, they were really good just for what they were. But, you know, Hasbro wants to keep making money off those trademarks, so they're going to keep revisiting them every so often, and I would wager within the next 3 years there'll be a new G1 Brawn toy. It'll be a lot bigger than this one. On the plus side, it'll scale better with this guy. Also, oddly enough, we did not get a Brawn in that vintage G1 reissue line from Walmart, but we got Outback. So we got the toy that was retooled from Brawn, but not Brawn himself. Go figure. I would have loved to show him off in this review, but he just doesn't exist in modern form, so oh well. But yeah, you can see very different vehicles. One's very boxy and angular, one's very curved and smooth. I mean, one's got a drill on the front of it, for crying out loud, so I wouldn't even say that these are like some sort of interplanetary equivalents. Like, they're very, very different vehicle modes. Usually, when a character gets a Seibertronian alt mode, it in some way resembles or references their Earth-based mode, but in this case, he's really just doing his own thing, which isn't bad. I think it's very creative what they did here. I think the vehicle mode, it just works so well for that very curved look that the character has in that Bumblebee movie. And I think it was very creative of them to come up with this. Especially when you look at something like Soundwave's alt mode, which is a flying square. Like, they really, you know, made it work here, which I like. Okay, now it's time to transform Brawn to his robot mode. So the first thing you want to do, if you haven't already, is remove the accessories. Take the cannon off, take the drill off, and then swing the grill back down if you need to. Then you're going to untab his legs from this front area in the cockpit, which can be a little bit tricky because it plugs in like two separate directions. The way I would do it is swing them out a little to where it untabs a bit here, and then pull down at the same time. So just kind of remove it at an angle is the best way to do it without putting too much stress on any tabs. So got his legs here, are kind of straightened out. Spin around at the waist. You're going to untab the fronts of his feet in these like knee areas. And swing those all the way in until the knee tabs into like where it belongs, right here. And then rotate forward. So we do the same thing here. Untab, swing, rotate. Boom. Look, ankle tilt. Hey, nice stuff, right? Okay, the next thing we want to do is bring his arms down. They're pegged in. There's a little, looks like a really shallow 5mm hole right here. There's little pegs inside the cockpit. So just be kind of careful, don't damage anything. His arms are kind of like bent at a double angle here, so you want to fix them. Straighten everything out, and swing these around. And down. So they're in a nice normal position. Bring his head up. Swing this whole little wheel section in. And then close his backpack up until it tabs into place. So here we go. This is Brawn's compact, tough-looking little robot mode. And I love the way he looks. He's almost comically small, but also so strong-looking that he looks like somebody that would suffer from like a lot of road rage and small man syndrome. I just think he's great and creative-looking. I really like him. So for his posability, his head does turn. It looks like it's just on a plain swivel, unlike the usual ball joint, because he can't look up or down, and he doesn't get too much movement in the head because of clearance. So it turns about that far. The shoulders, now, that's where I'm a little disappointed, because Ratchet set my expectations so high for this wave. The shoulders are ball joints, which is nothing new for Studio Series, but Ratchet made me think they're really, you know, kind of stepping it up and shine away from these. And unfortunately, these ball joints are fairly loose. I mean, they're not so loose that they're flopping, but it doesn't take much, like, at all. So if he's holding a big rifle of his, he may have a hard time, you know, holding his arms up, which is such a letdown. I mean, it would have been so easy just to have little universals in there. So it's a real shame. He does get some sort of like a bicep swivel, though it's more like up here. It sits on a mushroom peg, and it can rotate on this gray bit about that much. Not all the way, but you know, you get a pretty decent range of motion. Then he has double bend elbows due to his transformation, so at least he kind of makes up for the ball joints, because he can bring his arms way up there. That's pretty neat. And he actually has wrist articulation, which is awesome, because that's not always a given. He's got the full waist swivel, go all the way around. He does at least have universal hips, though he can't bring the legs up very high because of clearance. But he can bring them forward, back really well. He has a knee swivel, single bending knee that gets pretty deep there. And then he has his ankle tilt. And because of his transformation, he can even point his toes down a little bit too, which is just kind of a neat little touch, even if it's incidental. So, very posable little guy. I think he still, you know, would have been better served with the universal shoulders instead of these little ball joints. I mean, they're not very big either. Very small balls there, so, like, their capacity to support weight is already kind of limited because less surface area means less friction. A little bit of physics for you guys. So having those tiny little ball joints means he's not going to be able to hold a lot of weight up, like, at all. And that's a little disappointing, especially after seeing how good Ratchet's design was. Now, let's take a look at his weapons and their storage. So if you want to have him just kind of keeping his weapons on the back, he's got a little 3mm post sticking off the back there, which plugs into the side of his rifle. So you can put it right here. It doesn't stay on very well. That's pretty weak. Yikes. So really press it on there good. And then, if you want him to store everything, there's a little post right there for this hole. You just kind of put it on. Honestly, it's probably best to attach them first and then adhere to this thing, because it doesn't stay on there very well. Alright, so you get this. I can see this falling off already. That's a very loose connection. That's really disappointing. Should have made that hole a bit deeper there, so this, and make this a little bit longer so it could go in. Alright, so, I mean, it works. As long as you don't bump it, it'll probably be okay, I think, maybe. Or you can have him wield the weapons, and he's got, you know, a few different options here. You can have him wield the whole, like, combined thing, and it just looks like he's got some massive rifle here. And, you know, kind of get something similar to the pose he has on, like, the renders and all that. And I like that. That's probably how I'll display him. I think he looks cool that way. Or if you want, you can go ahead and detach this guy. Now, technically, you can store this on the back by itself if you want to. And just have it out of the way while he has just the rifle out. Or you can have him hold it like some sort of a, I don't know, mini sword weapon, a sword drill, something. Either way, he's got some options, and they're all pretty neat looking, even if the storage isn't entirely stable. Here we get Brawn's backdrop, and it looks nearly identical to the one that came with Ratchet. The only difference is that it has the number 80 on the side here instead of 82. And one thing you may notice if you're a bit eagle-eyed is there seems to be a little hole punched in the top of it right here. And for a second I couldn't really figure out what that came from, but then I realized it's from Brawn himself. It's from this, right here. Because even though he has a cardboard insert that separates him from this thing in the box, there's a hole cut in that insert for his little backpack to fit through, and apparently it punched a hole right into his own backdrop. So So that's annoying. I do wonder how common that's going to be, because I imagine it doesn't take much. So it's pretty frustrating just getting something like this damaged out of the box. But, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever. Plus, personally, I don't display them with the backdrops anyway, because it would just take up an absurd amount of space. I put the backdrops in storage. But let's go ahead and see how he looks. You know, fighting here. Looks very heroic and battle ready. He honestly looks like he's just popped right out of the scene. He's kind of walking toward you. I think it works for him. And a lot like Ratchet, he does have enough bright colors to contrast against, you know, this very, very dark backdrop. So I like it. I think it works for him. I just think it's a shame that apparently it has a tendency to self-destruct in the package. Here's our robot mode comparison with our Titan's Return Brawn. And like I said, big size difference. Not really fair to compare them, so it's more of just looking at how that design evolves and translates from a Generation 1 aesthetic to a G1-based live-action aesthetic. You see that the designers of the movie, and then, you know, by extension the toys, got really creative with Brawn's design. They didn't make him look just like a slightly Bayified G1 character. They made him very curvy, very different looking. Whereas the original Brawn was known for being very boxy in appearance, so bit of a way to evolve his character, but he still has the major elements. He's got roughly the same colors. He has his famous domed helmet-shaped head here, Autobot symbol on the chest, and then he gets some sort of, you know, hooded-type apparatus or kibble right behind his head. So, I mean, I can look at this and I'll know who it is. Despite all the big differences, he is still clearly the Brawn character that you could recognize from all the way back in 1984. So I think they did a really good job with him. And as satisfied as I was with this Titan's Return toy and a lot of the other Legends class mini-bots that came out around the time, seeing how good he looks does make me kind of have a hankering for getting some sort of, you know, highly posable upscaling of something that looks like this. Which I know is just feeding the machine, like, entirely. Hasbro's like, yes, good, buy the same character again. But, I mean, Titan's Return has been gone for about 5 years now, half a decade, so, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's too soon to get another Brawn. As much as I would like to see them move on to some other characters, it's also been just about long enough to where I'm not going to be too upset getting, like, an upgraded version of this guy. Here's a group shot I wanted to do with Brawn's Wavemate, the other B-verse Autobot I've reviewed so far, and this is Ratchet. One, because it makes for a nice group shot, and, you know, they share a similar aesthetic, but I also wanted to touch on their weapons, their rifles or cannons, whatever you call them. They look so incredibly similar that I initially thought they were the same weapon, and they do seem to be designed to basically be the same type of weapon, but just slightly modified to work better with each figure. Which is an interesting design choice, though realistically it does make sense that if you are in a war, in a battlefield setting, if you were to watch people go to war, they wouldn't all be running around with, like, custom signature weapons, right? They'd all be, like, having some sort of standard issue rifle or something. So it's interesting, but let's go ahead and take a quick look at those, kind of side by side here. Obviously the color's different, you know, one's a really, really dark gray, one's more of a brownish gray, and you can see that the overall shape of them is very, very similar. They have a lot of details that just kind of line up together. Would help if I was holding the right way. So you can see, you know, they kind of have the same kind of multi-layered rounded end. They got this little, like, stacked looking thing here. Then it curves down. You got this kind of wide barrel, then it thins out, goes to a longer barrel with a lot of the same details, and then you get these, you know, kind of ridges on the end here. I mean, very similar looking, and I guess they were designed to be that way, and it's surprising, because you don't usually see that, right? Usually, each character's got some sort of, like, standout, iconic weapon, and this seems to be a bit of a different approach that, I mean, on the one hand, it's a little bit less creative and original for each character, because having signature weapons is kind of a staple of Transformers toys, but at the same time, it does add a little bit of a flavor of realism to the battle that we were witnessing at the beginning of the movie. And this completes our look at the new Studio Series Brawn. I personally like this figure very much. I think he's got a really cool, quirky design, something that's just very different for Transformers, right? They're typically very boxy in appearance, outside of, say, maybe like Beast Wars characters. So to see a very, mechanical looking character be so rounded and so squat and honestly just kind of funny looking, but in a good way. Not funny looking bad like he's poorly made, but he just, I can picture like Danny DeVito's voice coming out of him. If I mean, like just angrily yelling at somebody. So I like him very much. He just kind of appeals to me for some reason. And he's really well made for the most part. He's got a very interesting and unique transformation. Really, really cool alt mode. I love the, the drill on the front and everything. The only flaw I would say this toy has, again, is the fact that they use these very small ball joints for the shoulders. Like, the ball joints are already bad enough, but when you look at how tiny the balls, inside the socket are, it's not going to take a whole lot to really rub away what little friction they have. And I do foresee this toy, after, too much posing or play, really just getting some very floppy arms. So that's a big shame, and it's something I really wish they wouldn't have done. Like, they got me so hyped and got me so ready for something new with Ratchet, just to kind of throw Brawn at me and be like, oh, psych, nope, we're still keeping the ball joints. I'm like, oh, thought we learned a lesson here, but I guess not. So that's, my one big pet peeve with the toy. Aside from that, fantastic figure. There's one thing I would have loved to see, and it's not a knock on the toy, but it's kind of weird that, the movie referenced the whole, shot in the shoulder joke, the packaging references it. Why was there not a hard point put on his shoulder? Like, at least one of them, so you could put Fire Blast effects on there. I feel like that is such a missed opportunity to not let us put some sort of like explosion or smoke or something on his shoulder. Like, doesn't even have to include it. I mean, that'd be cool if he included it. But even if we didn't, like, we have options. We have plenty of blast effects from other toys that you can just put on there for, the purpose of toy photography or putting on the shelf or just having a pretty dark sense of humor, So, big missed opportunity there. I mean, I get that, the hard points aren't really part of Studio Series. They're their own thing, separate from War for Seibertron and Legacy. But, I mean, it would have been such a great little Easter egg, and would have taken like nothing at all for them to just put that one little raised bump right there to attach something to. So, you guys messed up. This guy could have been 10 times better than he already is. But, that stuff aside, great toy. If you have any love for anything live action, the Brawn character himself, or the Bumblebee movie itself, I think you'll very much enjoy this figure, and you should go out and try to find one. Of course, that is just my take on Brawn, so now I want to know what you all think of him. Do you think he's a good little figure? Do you like, what they were going with and trying to do something a little bit different, yet keep him recognizable? Or do you not like him for some reason? Is he too small? Is he too far off from, the old Brawn design? Or do you just not like live action stuff? And there's, all sorts of things you could say about this. Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Studio Series number 80, Brawn. And with all that said, I will see you next time.